quite a lot of faces here, I know, a few I don't know. Those who don't know me, my name's Nolan, I work for Trademark in Belfast. I'll tell you a wee bit more about Trademark in a minute. We've got a couple of hours here, I think, haven't we? I think that's about 2 hours, so there's 3 speakers, there's 2 presentations, and a speech. First thing is I want to say that me and Alice aren't experts on Corks, by the way, so don't expect to hear too much information in terms of the theoretical background of Cork. We're just going to talk about our experience of setting up Corks, and particularly setting up Corks in Belfast. Who we are is Trademark. Trademark's the anti-sectarian unit of Congress. We're part of the ICTU for our sins in Belfast, and we deal with sectarian intimidation and conflict innovation in the workplace. So there's harassment and intimidation of workers in Belfast for the last 20 years, even 18 years. That's been our job, and it still is, unfortunately. A lot less than it used to be, but we're still called in to deal with those issues. We're going to Coca-Cola factory in Ballymoney next week because it's ongoing. Work is being threatened. And that's our core work, and we still do that. But we also do a lot of trade union education work, political economy, history, politics, and all the rest of it. Based on what we call the double transition, which is a welcome transition from violence to peace in the north, through we're very supportive, obviously, of the peace process, but also the transition from social democracy to neoliberalism. The north's been late to that particular game, and we kind of had for 40 years military kingdomism. The north, weirdly, its welfare state was protected because there was a war going on there, weirdly. Now that the war's finished and we're part of the peace process, neoliberalism is kicking in massively and very quickly, and we're catching up very quickly with the south. And cuts are beginning to hurt really badly in the north. They haven't been for a few years, but now they are, last 18 months particularly. And we're a victim of that as well, as an organisation. In terms of our interest in, that's where we are. We're based on the largest interface in Belfast, Trademark, that's a view from our office. And the importance of where we are and where interfaces are is that over half the death occurred in that part of the north and west Belfast during the conflict. And the majority of those were within 500 metres of an interface. So the conflict hurt working class people the most. And it didn't hurt the people it should have hurt. Which is why it's important that that particular conflict came to an end. But the legacy of it hasn't gone away. And it's very much still with us. And the majority of areas of highest deprivation, unsurprisingly, are in the same areas. So that's the legacy of 40 years of conflict. And we're stuck in the middle of that. And it was in that context that we as the anti-sectarian unit wondered about 5 or 6 years ago, was there anything else we could do? Because we were sick of, running training courses and capacity building courses and conflict intervention and sorting shit out for people, and it was all very negative, it was all very depressing, to be honest with you. It was draining on the staff resources, on their energy, on their commitment, because it's hard to deal with sectarianism every day. There's nothing positive in it. It's just shit, frankly. And the point came about 5 or 6 years ago, we thought there must be something more positive we can do, something that gives us a bit of hope. And that was missing, not just from the north of Ireland, or from here, but from our organisation as well. We're going to get bogged down in all that shit. And so we decided to, I should mention that, sorry, last point. There are now 99 interfaces in Belfast, up from 78 since the ceasefires. So they're increasing. They're not coming down, they're going up. So we're getting a kind of peace through segregation in the north, really kind of benign apartheid, that's what's emerging, ethnic cantons, where people live in almost total separation, particularly in big urban areas. And even in villages and towns across Ireland, there are invisible barriers. I live in a village where there's a Catholic butchers and Protestant butchers, a Catholic pub and a Protestant pub, and never the twain shall meet. So that's the context of Trademark. In the crash of 2008, which kind of presses a lot of this work, we started doing, people came to us, particularly in the trade union movement community, and asked us to explain what just happened, where that crash came from, what caused it, and will it happen again? And we said, yes, we'll try and explain it. We'll try to explain where it came from, the crash, and yes, it will happen again, as we haven't gone out of the crash since 2008, we're in permanent stagnation. And so we developed a whole series of courses in political economy, in trying to understand the world that we live in from an economic perspective. Name and identify the system, who benefits from that system, how they benefit from that system, and the people who are on our course know that we do that, that's what we do. Participate in the construction of democratic organisations capable of challenging that system, whether you're a trade unionist, whether you're a party political activist, or whether you're involved in, and that's the conclusion we came to, cooperative development, or all three, if you want. And actively promote visions of feasible and just alternatives. It wasn't enough to critique neoliberalism, which is easy, by the way, we can all do that, to the council line. It's that classic game, what's going to replace it? Where do we go from here? Is there anything we can do now to not just challenge the power structures, but create something positive in the midst of kind of degradation and poverty and immigration and all the rest of it? We went through a thinking process where we come out with an idea of trying to, first study or look at or investigate alternative economics. And we went through an awful lot of kind of reading and research, like many of you do probably, in a similar fashion. in order to create what, well, a couple of academics call, I know it's academic language, but I still like it, practical utopias. Build the future now. It's only what we can do now to create the kinds of society we want to see emerge in the future, because we found out very quickly when we talk about co-ops, is if you can point to one that was successful, no one will listen to you. So we thought, fuck, we're going to have to actually go out and set a co-op up, and no one's going to believe us. Even though Trademark should say we are a co-op, but we're a different kind of co-op. In the sense we're a democratic organisation. So we kind of looked at all those ideas of the commons, the economy for the common good, even open source software, which is massive now in terms of software development, crowdfunding, ethical lending, that debt system. You remember back in the 70s and 80s, local exchange trading systems. I was part of that 15, 20 years ago, where I painted someone's bathroom or tiled their kitchen, and they gave me some really horrible homemade wine and and let's just that bartering system. It wasn't for me. I wanted cash in my pocket. But anyway, land trusts, all sorts of various ways that we can, as a people, can reclaim the commons. And the fight for water, of course, is exactly the same fight. The fight against water charges is reclaiming the commons. That's ours. That belongs to us, the people. It's part of our commons. And so that was kind of what framed our thinking at the time. And of course, there's also big projects around Britain and Ireland of transition towns, local currencies being used, all sorts of weird and wacky and useful ideas about how we can do things differently than neoliberalism and everything that entails. And of course, co-ops, that came into it too. And our kind of research, we ended up saying we're going to spend a bit of time trying to talk about worker and social cooperatives. I'll explain what they are in a minute. Because we thought they could offer a practical alternative. That's all, a practical alternative. Someone says, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to replace it with? Well, look, this is a good idea. They were democratic, they're shared, and they're sustainable. Co-ops can't be bought out, they won't leave, they don't relocate to Eastern Europe. If they're successful here, they'll stay here because they're owned by local people. There's all sorts of ways they tick every single box. So they're democratic, and that's the important thing. We thought that we were going around the country last year doing an awful lot of work with Right to Water and Right to Change. And there's an awful lot of people in the room, libertarian, kind of right-wingers, and direct democracy, island tossers, and people like that, you know? And they were very big into political reform and political democracy, as if that was the only thing that mattered. If you had a Doyle that was uncorrupt and transparent and accountable, everything else would be okay. If you did crony capitalism, you want good old-fashioned capitalism back. You know, the one where we were all treated really well back in the 50s and 60s, and there wasn't massive immigration and high unemployment. And we thought, well, political democracy is important, but without economic democracy, it's largely pointless. And we frame that in the sense that if democracy is such a good idea, and we like the idea of democracy, and we can have a more democratic society, we might have a more active citizenship, maybe more elections, less elections, more participation in elections. You also need, let's extend that democracy wider and further, and let's bring it into the workplace. If democracy is such a good idea, why limit it to an election every 5 years? You want to have democracy every day in your workplace, and have a democratic workplace. And that was our argument. To create sustainable, resilient communities, because capitalism isn't, we're not going to get back to the 1950s or 60s anytime soon. Social democracy is dead, it's gone, it's finished. And that golden period of capitalism isn't coming back. The only way to get back there is with a time machine. So we need to change the way we do things, because things aren't going to get better. What a co-op is, it's not a social enterprise. So when we started doing this research, in Britain and in Ireland, when you talk about alternatives to a normal capitalist entrepreneurial business, people immediately go, oh, they're a social enterprise. This is really important for us. That in Ireland and Britain, particularly Ireland took it from Blair's communitarian approach, is that they're quite big into social enterprises. Social enterprise is a business that has an environmental or social goal. It's dead on, that's very good. And there are social enterprises that do brilliant work, but they're not co-ops, and co-ops aren't social enterprises. They're not democratic. So you can have a charity with a board of do-gooders, Blue Rinse Brigade and Pearls and wealthy local people who run a charity. No, not all social enterprises like it, I know that. There are some really good ones based in the community. A co-op's very different from a social enterprise. If you go to Europe, anywhere in mainland Europe, and you hear the word social enterprise, they're talking about cooperatives. It's only when you come to Britain and Ireland, when you hear the word social enterprises, they're not talking about cooperatives. It's important to make that distinction there. A cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, cultural needs, and it's democratic. That's the thing, one member, one vote, that's it. It's not very complicated. And the reason why we don't like social enterprises, not don't like them, but we want to make sure there's a separation, is that they're based largely on that notion of charity. and helping the poor, and helping the disadvantaged, and helping the... And of course, if you can help the poor, you can say, well, which one are you? Are you the undeserving or the deserving poor? I'm not quite sure which one you are. No, I think you're fucking undeserving. I don't think you want to come into that group here. Co-ops don't do that. Co-ops are owned by the people who run them. They're owned by the people who use them. And that's very different. And it's hard to explain to people, social enterprises, how important the different value bases are, what they mean to the people in them. Now, as part of that, because we knew nothing about co-ops apart from our own limited experience in working in Trademark, we kind of went on a few study trips. And I know that, well, I'm assuming everyone knows about Mondragon, probably you know, it's the most famous co-op in the world. Based in the Mondragon Valley in the Basque Country. We visit there. We had a great 4 or 5 days there. It was organised by a bloke down in Bill Kelly, who I'll talk about in a minute. And Mondragon was fascinating for us, I suppose. Now, it could never be repeated. It's of its place and of its time, it's of its own context. You can't copy Mondragon. But it's useful to see a practical alternative. And I wouldn't say it's a utopia either. Mondragon has 74,000 worker owners, 257 companies in the corporation. It's completely democratic, 1 member, 1 vote. Revenues 2012, 24 billion. And it's been around for a long time, of course, as well. They manufacture Spain's first computer chips, and at the moment they're into wind, solar and energy power, doing big projects. The last time they made someone redundant was 1974, because if a particular business therein goes under or is challenged, because they compete in capitalist circles. They're socialist internally, if you like, but externally they still have to compete in a capitalist world. They still have to sell their goods and services. But if one part of the business goes under, they simply move and retrain people and move them somewhere else. And they have their own bank, Caja Laboral, with 389 branches across Spain. It's the only bank in Spain that didn't go under in a crash, the only one. We met with the chief executive of that bank when we were there, and there were people in the room, there was 30 of us, and there were a few politicians and a few kind of venture capitalists as part of this delegation. It was a weird group of people to be in. And one of them asked them, mind me asking how much you get paid as chief executive of a major Spanish bank? He said, yeah, 150,000 euros a year. It's a lot to me and you, like I know, but to them it's fucking nothing. And the bloke says, well, if you work for a private bank, you could be on millions, share options and all the rest of it. Why don't you move? Why don't you get a better job? That's what the bloke said, get a better job, another bank. And we were in that building there, near the top floor, and the bloke pointed out the window. I said, I want to leave this. One of the safest places in Europe to live, one of the best qualities of life in Europe, on all the social indices, happiness and well-being, and teenage pregnancies, obesity, alcoholism, crime. It's one of the top in Europe, that one place, that one region of the European Union. And the venture capitalists simply didn't understand why you wouldn't move for money. And that's the difference, that's the value shift that we wanted to engage in. They have their own university, which is a cooperative university. One example of what they did during the crisis in 2008, because they got hit like everyone else got hit to a degree, some of their businesses. 20% of the workforce left their job for the year on 80% of their money. And they were retrained while they were off. They weren't really off, they were retraining at 8%, and then at the end of that year, they went back into their businesses, and for 1 year, another 20% went and trained through, and then went back in a year later, and after that, they didn't do it again because it worked. They retrained, and that's what they can do, that's what Co-Operative can do. It talks about sustainability. If that was a capitalist firm, they would just sack you, and they'd move to Poland. That's what they do, they move where labour is cheaper. Here, in Mondragon, the first principle of the Mondragon Corporation is the sovereignty of labour. That's what they call it. I love that sound. It's sovereignty of labour. It's all the most important thing. The worker is the most important thing. And we also then went. I didn't go to that place. People from our organisation went to Marinaleda. I don't know if you've heard of it. Probably some of you have. It's in Andalusia in southern Spain. Kind of anarcho-communist, if I could use that terminology. It was taken over almost by a small group of people who got elected onto the council. It's a small town in southern Spain, which has that anarchist tradition, you know, all across Spain, particularly in Andalusia, where they were decimated by Franco. And they kind of, over time, the council turned that town into a cooperative town. Everything is cooperative. 90% of the people who work there work in the town's cooperative agricultural processing plants. They spent about 20 years occupying land all around the area, which eventually they got by legal rights. It was land that was unused, and they turned the soil and turned it into productive farming, avocados, oranges and olives and all the rest of it. And Marinaleda is kind of utopia in that sense, and it's democratic. The council has been re-elected again and again and again. The average salary there is €1,600 a month. That's what you get when you work for the co-op, which is quite high in Spain. And one example of what they do locally, I'll just give one example, I'll give you loads. The local council expropriated thousands of square metres of land that was being unused and was owned by private aristocrats mainly, for the construction of new houses. We have a housing problem, major one, in up here. And so they had the same in Andalusia. Land, building materials and architectural plans are provided to any self-builder through public grants. If you want to build a house, you can, and you get grants, you get all the help you need, assistance and advice. Free assistance from professional builders. If you can't build it yourself, you can get builders in to help you build it. The hours you do spend building it are deducted from the total costs, because you have to buy the materials, you get kind of a loan. And a monthly payment of €15 a month is what you pay back. I say you pay back €15, there's no imposition on your salary, which is low, you only get 1,600. You pay €15 back for that house. The only difference is, you can't sell your house, because it's owned collectively by the town. You can build your own design, you can live in it all your life, you can pass it on to your children, you just can't sell it. You can't speculate. And of course, in Marin Leather, there was no housing crisis, because there was no housing market. People had homes, and that's a distinction that we probably couldn't even handle. And I know there's people in the room probably going, "I couldn't sell a house." Not too sure about that. It's a big shift in value. A home, not an asset. In Marin Leather. And then we sent another team off to learn more. This one's probably more appropriate. Emilia-Romagna is a region of northern Italy around Bologna and Imola. Well, I'll tell you about it a little bit. And it's more appropriate because it's not a big corporation like Mondragon. It's not a town, if you like Marin Leather. It's a region. It's an area, so you can think of Cork County, if you want to think of that. So it's a wide region. Emilia-Romagna is full of co-ops. I'll just explain a bit. It's known as the Red Belt. After the end of the Second World War, because of Italian politics, when the partisans came down from the mountains, they went into local politics. The Communist Party of Italy was the kind of main driver behind it, and they set up co-ops. That's what they did. They didn't do anything else. There was no big industry coming in after Italy. There was near enough a civil war happening in Italy at the time, from the left and the right. And that area was known as the Red Belt. Small-scale, employee-owned firms dot the landscape. If you buy a cheese, leave a child off at a creche, go and get a bottle of wine, it's nearly always a co-op that you'll be going into if you go and visit the area around Bologna. More than half the population are in co-ops, working. Co-ops employ 10% of the workforce and generate 30% of the GDP, and up to 60% of the GDP in places like Imola is generated by co-ops. You can imagine what the equivalent in Ireland is. Infinitesimally small. So in parts of Europe you visit there, co-ops play a vital role in the local community. Of course, they're decades ahead of where we could ever be. In Bologna itself, 15 of the 50 largest businesses are co-ops, and they employ 25,000 and 10% of the labour force of Bologna, which is one of the largest cities in northern Italy. Housing co-ops and consumer co-ops are so numerous that they hold down prices, and most privatised social services are now provided by employee co-ops. So the place is turning itself into a cooperative region, if you like, where workers own the means of production, if I can use that language. But you still have to compete in a marketplace, you still have to sell your good or service in the marketplace to succeed. Unemployment is 3%, lowest in Europe, Emilia-Romagna, even in Italy, which is crumbling at the seams. Italy's banking sector is about to collapse as we speak. But unemployment in that region is 3%. In Mondragon it's 1%. In the Mondragon Valley, in the Basque, I should have mentioned it was in the Basque Country, Mondragon. The regional finance minister said the massive presence of property firms is a stabilising factor in the regional economy. Stability, co-ops, they can't be bought out, they won't move. If people will take a pay cut before they'll see it go, corporate members will decide themselves to help the business survive a downturn. And most importantly, there is a kind of a wide political and societal understanding of and support for local ownership. People get it, so they live it. This is good, it works. Why give it up? Our problem is people don't get it because they have no experience of it, or very little experience of it. We're used to a very different culture of work. It's the boss, it's the hierarchy, it's employment. And it's hard to convince people to leave one to move to the other. And the result, as I said before, is thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises. The densest concentration of small businesses in the industrial world, in Emilia-Romagna. Everyone's in a business. There are 4 or 5 people in a co-op, there are 10 people in a co-op, there are 15 people in a co-op. If you set up a business in Emilia-Romagna, you set up a co-op, because that's the culture of the area. And it's that cultural shift which is the big issue for us. Of the 220 regions of the European Union, Emilia-Romagna is in the top 10, along with Mondragon in the Basque Country. We're in the top 10. I think the best places to live, quality of life-wise. and it's because the 60% or 30% of the GDP is property, that's why. The knock-on effect in terms of the social indices is massive, and it has some of the lowest levels of inequality in the European Union, whereas we know Ireland has, what, the highest level of inequality, because we have a completely almost neoliberalised system. We were neoliberal before neoliberalism was even fucking thought about. We've been to it by about 30 years, from about 1945 onwards. And so we did all that studying, thought about it. Ali and Joe will talk later about the Belfast Cleaning Society, which was the first co-op we helped set up. And we kind of set up before we even did any of this. It came as what there was a cart before horse. And Ali will tell you that story, and it's her story to tell and Joe's story to tell. In terms of the European picture, Spain's got 33,000 worker co-ops with nearly 400,000 workers. Italy has 27,000. France has 2,000 worker co-ops. Small, and those ones are mainly in engineering and chemicals. Britain has 400 worker co-ops. There's only one example. There are other kinds of co-ops. Credit unions are co-op. Obviously, they're a big agricultural co-op. In terms of worker co-ops, is the one we focus on, because we wanted to work with working class people in areas of high deprivation. So our focus was always going to be on worker co-ops. But there are other kinds of co-ops you can set up. But I don't have time to talk about them all. In Ireland, it's the lowest in Europe. Ireland reaches the top of all the worst tables. Don't we? It's like the top of all the worst tables in terms of inequality, in terms of numbers of millionaires paid up population, in terms of class, numbers of children in our classes in our schools. Every one, we're at the top. It's a dodgy table. Worker co-ops, it's the lowest in Europe by a long, long way. Britain's at like the third lowest. Even they have 400 worker co-ops. And that 16, by the way, is a bit of guesswork by me and Alan. It was 20 about 5 years ago, and they're just all closed, they're dropping off. And most of them, about 7 of them are in Belfast, and have been created in the last 4 years by Ali and Joe and others. So it's a wasteland. Basically, there is no cooperative sector. We had Co-Operative visiting us. That's the Worldwide Worker Cooperative Federation, which is a multi-billion-pound federation. That all those factories in Uruguay and Argentina that have been occupied by their workers for the last 10 years and taken over and are functioning co-ops, they all pay into the COPA, Worldwide Federation. They came to visit us. And fuck me, was that an embarrassing conversation. They came to Belfast, and we took them to Dublin, and they met them. Where are your co-ops? He says, well, she's in one. And it was like that. And they were very good to us, and they were very helpful, but it was very embarrassing. So that's where we are in terms of worker co-ops. In terms of social co-ops, whether that be consumer co-ops or what we call multi-stakeholder co-ops, i.e., if you had a creche would be owned initially by the workers and the parents. And the workers and the parents would elect a committee to run it democratically. That's a multi-stakeholder, you have different classes of membership. We have, I think, two maybe, on the island of Ireland. Hardly any at all. Our co-ops, as you know, are credit unions and agricultural are the big two. Now, the reason why they're good, you can take all them examples from Mondragon and Emilia-Romagna, the reason why they're good, there are social and economical reasons why they're better than normal capitalist enterprises. There are reasons, there is evidence. But they're starting to fail as businesses. Failure rate amongst co-ops is below 20%. They tend to survive. There's a problem in there as well, because cooperative members tend to self-exploit. If you set up a co-op, you tend to keep it going longer than it should, because you don't let go of it. So you can be paying yourself shit wages for years. So there's an issue there as well about self-exploitation. The failure rate of new capitalist enterprises is above 80%. The old capitalist businesses fail in their first year. Very few make it through. Co-ops are more successful for all sorts of other reasons that we can go into later. And across Europe, since the crisis in 2008, cooperative and cooperative membership, particularly worker co-ops and social co-ops, has risen dramatically. Because in times of crisis, people do tend to come together. So there has been an opportunity there for cooperatives to develop and to show actually and to evidence the fact that they're a better way to do business, they're a better way to make business and deliver services. We have 2.9 million members in credit unions, which is a fantastic base for the development of co-ops. If that wasn't such a fucking right-wing, conservative, almost blue-chip organisation, fuck say that here. The credit union has billions of euros of assets. I'm in a credit union, I'm on the committee of our video, billions of euros of assets, and doesn't use them. Now, they offered a few quid, didn't it, down in Kelly recently for housing. They should be doing that all the time, by the way. Not offering money to the state, though, I disagree with that, but offering money to the development of a cooperative sector. We went to their AGM 2 to 3 years ago to talk about a small fund that we discovered secretly they had. And they have a worker cooperative development fund. It's a €7,000 grant. £7 grand is not bad, you haven't got a pot of this in. And look to start something up. And we got a copy of of the AGM minutes or the AGM from before, and one of the, I won't say who it was, but someone seen in the credit union had written on it, "Do not promote this." Scrawled on something. I swear I'm not making it up. Do not promote this. So you have credit, you have a cooperative finance co-op, you have the highest density of membership on the planet, Ireland. Highest density of membership. No one else has the number of people in credit unions that we do, but it doesn't do anything with it. But there's a huge potential there. If that door was opened for investment.
There are quite very important credit unions. Did the banks kind of got into bed with credit unions?
There's new legislation movement. No, credit unions here are independent. They are independent. They're part of a
financial regulation.
Oh yeah, because of the new legislation, yeah.
There's a lot of banks now involved in credit unions in the since the crash of snow.
They brought in new legislation. It was only about 3 months ago, wasn't it? For new
regulation.
Bankers
are in there, and with the change, you get loans.
Well, I put it this way: if you go and sit on the credit union board, who do you think sits on the board? It's local business people, it's the local head of the local school, it's the local priest, it's the bishop. Politicians are nearly always on them. So the same governing class control those institutions that control everything else. But the potential's there, what I'm saying, you know.
See, that's secular society. You know, we would say with the trade unions. It's secular society.
There's not too many priests in trade unions, I know what you mean though.
No, but it's a secular society that the members don't push it.
Well, Ali will talk later on about it. Even when you sit on worker co-ops here, one of the biggest dynamics in a worker co-op is what's called boss culture. In fact, the people want a boss. This is a very authoritarian state. Its history is authoritarian. Its history is right-wing. We have no left-wing to speak of in terms of numbers. And everything you're talking about here is has a radical edge to it. We simply don't have it. Don't have the experience of it. And even when Ali and the others set up co-ops, one of the biggest problems they had was order. People wanted to be told what to do. It wouldn't take responsibility. Huge cultural shift and value shift needs to take place. So it is a reflection, absolutely. But the point is the potential is there. No one has the density of membership of credit unions on the planet that we have. And they have huge resources, but they don't use any of it in ways they could, and they could be more imaginative. ICOS, Irish Cooperative Organisation Society, combined turnover of 12 billion, 150,000 individual members, employing 12,000 people. What is that? What's all this, do you think? Yeah, farmers. It's the farming industry, which is, Fine Gael, Fine Gael dominated industry. Again, but why is ICOS not standing where I'm standing right now doing this talk? Because they should be. Because it's their job. They're the biggest cooperative organisation in Ireland. They have huge, look at that. I mean, we haven't got a pot to piss in, I'm not kidding. We're month to month in our wages. They've got 12 billion turnover assets, including ICOS itself. They have lots of money internally because all the members pay fees to belong to ICOS. They do nothing in terms of promoting cooperatives outside of their agricultural sector. They could. They have huge resources and assets. The state doesn't have to do it. The cooperatives themselves could do that. They choose not to because, once again, it's a reflection of Irish society, that lack of that radical edge involved. All the other ones we've looked at are left-wing, obviously, whether it's the Basque Country, whether it's Emilia-Romagna, or whether it's Maranello.
Sure, the European headquarters for cooperative studies is in UCC.
I know, yeah, why are they not here? We've never met them, but we've been prime cops for 6 years.
Yeah. And William Thompson was the founder of cooperative.
I think most of their co-op work in Cork is linked to the agricultural industry, isn't it?
It is, and the method and all those things.
Yeah.
Or the smaller cooperatives. But I mean, the main tenets of the credit unions in Ireland is education, and yet when you go to them for a loan for your third level or whatever, you push into a system where you have to wait and wait and wait, and eventually, if you do get a loan, it's there to the amount, so you can't say yes, I can work or I can't work. You know,
credit unions are,
promote education.
Since 2008, of course, they've been afraid to lend, like all the banks have been. That's just part of the legacy of the crash.
Yeah.
But in terms of what they do as an organisation, they're very, very conservative in terms of what they'll lend to and what they don't invest in very much at all. There's also happening on here the Irish Cooperative Housing Association, which is based on Conliffe Road or North Social Road in Dublin. It's in the house gifted to them by Plunkett Foundation. Horace Plunkett, he was the founder of the cooperative movement in Ireland. He was a unionist, Anglo-Irish, and whenever the 26 counties became, I use independent advisedly, whenever it got its own country, or do things to the country, he fucked off to England because he didn't want to be part of an independent Ireland. But the Plunkett Foundation in England now is a major developer of cooperatives. They don't do very much work here. And so yeah, you can look, and in the north of Ireland, of course, we have 251 cooperatives, 16 worker co-ops, and the rest of them would be again agricultural cooperatives, which is basically rich farmers clubbing together to buy expensive plant machinery and employing migrant workers to work in their processing factories. That's their kind of cooperatives. They don't follow, they don't carry through the ethics of cooperatives very much, those big cooperatives. They're not really co-ops, they're like it. The other issue is a relation, for me anyway, the relation between trade unions and cooperatives. If you're in France or Italy, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'll give you an example. Worker buyouts. In France and Italy, the two big unions directly support worker co-ops. In Italy, if a business goes under, they have a Marcora law, and the law states if a business is about to be sold, certain types of businesses, or go under, you have to by law offer it to the workers first. They get first bites. And the workers get a chance, their own unions will come in with forensic accountants, with training and development. But even when workers are working within a firm, they have their idea of future ownership. And that idea, we could own this one day, and they push for it, and they organise for it. And that's something that happened in Uruguay, happened in Argentina. In Italy it's in law, in France it's in law, it's in legislation, you have to offer it to the workers first. And the workers get assistance, they get help. We've had about 6 or 7 phone calls in the last 3 years about trying to help businesses that are going under. But there's nothing, there's no money, there's no finance, there's no training, there's no development from the trade unions or from the states, north or south. There's nothing, it's a wasteland. So even if there's a business in Cork with 20 or 30 people in it, and they had to say there's a succession issue, and the person wanted to leave or they died or whatever, or they wanted to retire, but it was a good business, but no one really wanted to buy it because profit margins weren't high enough, but it could continue as a worker co-op. It won't happen, it will close. And it's easier to save a business, I can assure you, than it is to start one up. We're seeing at the moment the steel industry in Britain. When those 15,000 steel jobs go, that's it, forever. Regardless of upturn and infrastructure investment. Worker buyouts across Europe are daily business. In France, it's usually about 2 a week on average. There's been 1 in Britain in 30 years. A Welsh bedding company that have made mattresses. 1 in 30 years. Ireland.
And they do it in Argentina as well. I don't know what they're doing now.
They just occupied their factory. Yeah.
But they were successful enough.
There's 200 of them work as co-ops now in Argentina and Uruguay. And they're very successful. But the law changed in Argentina to allow them then to own it. So they occupied it, they kept producing whatever they were producing. Some of them changed production, but they had to get legislative changes because they didn't officially own it, they were legally occupying it. But yeah, it worked. The point is, there are huge potential there for worker buyouts of firms. Happens all across Europe, doesn't happen here or even found out in GB. Recent report by Co-ops UK, again they do corporate development in Britain, they don't do here, but they do over there. Almost a third of company closures are succession failures, viable businesses which shut shop because no suitable successor can be found. So there's 30% of all businesses in Britain, SMEs, that close, could be transferred into worker ownership. If there was the political will to do it, and that's the issue, there's no political will to do any of this. We met with the Orators Committee on Jobs and Innovation 2 years ago. You might as well have just been talking to your fucking cat, you know, no interest whatsoever. One of the questions from some Fina girl, I can't remember the TD, she said, these co-op things you do, just, who makes all the decisions? Because obviously you need someone like her. No, as your CEO, your director, you need someone to tell you what to do. Workers couldn't sit down together and actually democratically work out the best way forward for their lives, the lives of their children. We could do that. You need an entrepreneur or an Alan Sugar or a Fina LTD to tell us what to do. They have a complete lack of faith in people and humanity, which is why they don't believe in the concept of co-ops or indeed of democracy, really, to be honest with you. So, since then, the last 5 or 6 years, I'm finished now, we've been doing lots of things in terms of trying to promote cooperatives. We had a window of opportunity. For about 2.5 years, we had a few quid extra. We did it, we went around, an awful lot of work, I won't bore with the details. That was one of the first Co-Operative, no one gets hurt. We tried to invite all the co-ops from across Ireland, worker co-ops. We got together in Belfast, we set up the worker cooperative network, and we're still kind of working with those co-ops, although some of them are struggling. We had a big conference down in Limerick with Bill Kelly. They used to be called Metal Midwest, the word you use, Metal, the old agricultural co-op in Ireland. And they have since set up the Urban Co-op in Limerick, which is the newest co-op in Ireland. And it's a consumer and worker co-op, it's a multi-stakeholder co-op, different classes of membership. So if you get a chance to go and visit, you should. There's a lad there called Bill Kelly who's pushing it. But again, when you compare the resources that they have, what we have, to the resources that ICOS and the credit union have in Ireland, and the work that other co-op federations in Europe do, we're pissing in the wind, really. this is nice, this is good, and hopefully someone will learn something today. In terms of long-term structural change in our economy, it's not happening and it won't happen. But the potential is massive, it really is. And since then, in the north, and that 5-year period, Ali will talk more maybe, we've helped set up a Creative Workers Co-Operative. It's a very good graphic design and media co-op. Farmageddon Brewery, one of 3 microbreweries, we've helped set up. They're now 7 workers, they're exporting across the world into Europe. Very successful co-op, they're expanding all the time. Luna's a cafe, number of 2 cafes we helped set up. It's a small, easy thing to do, but you know, we've helped set them up. That's the bottom of the Fork Road. And Down to Earth, which is a, believe it or not, a wood, what do they call themselves? An environmental friendly burial company, cooperative. If you want to be buried in a forest, Down to Earth do that, eco-friendly. Those are 4 of about 10 we've helped. With no resources, no government funding, no state support at all. There's no capacity or infrastructure in the north for cooperative development. In the south, you had a cooperative development unit in force, closed down in 2002 by Fianna Fáil. Don't need coal, so we've got fucking Celtic Tiger. So here there's nothing. So wait, you can't go anywhere and ask for help, even if you wanted to. You might contact ICOS, but I can tell you get short shrift. So that's where we are. Quite depressing, but you can see the potential. That's what I wanted to show today was, you know, vision and reality. That's the vision, and there's great ideas, but the reality is it's hard. It's tough. It's up in Cork in Ireland. So if you think they're doing it, do it, but remember, there's no one going to help you, apart from the people you bring in to do it yourselves. That's me. Thank you. Our next is Alice McLaren. She works with us in Trademark, but we all took a decision about 6 years ago that if we had time in the